welcome to Directionally Correct, a Fink's podcast with Cole and Scott.
Today's guest, Alexis Fink.
Thanks to our sponsors, Worklytics. Generate actionable insights from work data while protecting your privacy using workplace analytics with our partners, Worklytics.
How's it going,
guy?
It's SIOP.
It's
like nerd Disneyland.
Absolutely.
I love this. And I will say, I have been, first of all, delighted at our post-pandemic experience. We had over 5,000 registrants, which is incredible.
Yes.
It is. And certainly for us, those of us who are practitioners, this year, I was really delighted at the number of sort of AI and data-centric, data science-centric presentations. I was delighted to see some really good focus on ethics. We had attorneys showing up on panels, et cetera. I was really excited to see the balance tilting more towards practitioner and interesting practitioner problems. And I was tickled at the number of sessions that included non-IOs.
Yes.
So there were a whole bunch of them that had like a...
Can I give you credit for that for a second? No, I'm not
You can
joking.
try.
I mean, you should.
I feel like you have been pushing for that for years, and it's finally manifesting itself in force. And thank you.
Well,
I think it makes it better. I've had a much better conference because of it.
I totally think it makes it better. I should give a shout out to Richard Rosenau, who has been all over this thing. He's been like, what do you? It's not live tweet. It's not live tweeting when you do it on LinkedIn, but I think every single session he's been posting summaries and photos and how awesome they are. It's like our best marketing weapon.
There's also like a diversity of sessions as well. Like I went to probably the best session I've been to in a long time was this like improv comedy around the personality factor.
I didn't go to that one.
It was so good.
Yeah?
It was so good.
What did you learn? What was great?
Well, I didn't really learn much.
But you loved it.
I enjoyed it. Yes,
Okay.
that's the point.
I got that.
We need more podcast sessions, definitely. A little shameless promotion.
Maybe not the last session of the last day.
So why is that, Alexis? Why are we the last session of the last day?
That also might be my fault because there's a real scheduling problem to make sure that people don't overlap and people don't overlap with other people, and the analytical problem of having a lot of people on sessions and a lot of people with other people on sessions and needing to make sure that they will all fit into the available time. And I'm on 3 sessions this time. This is the smallest one. The other ones had more people on them, so that could be my fault.
Well, thank you, I guess.
I'll try to do better.
I'm sorry.
Time.
Well, these are just like the real SIOPers, right? People who
That's
get
right.
to the very end.
That's right. We're here to the bitter end. Plus, we don't technically start for 12 minutes, so...
That's
That
the
is
beauty
true.
of Directionally Correct. What people don't realize is it always starts way before it starts.
That's
in
awesome.
every episode.
I'll tell you one other thing I went to this time that really filled me with joy. There was a really, really good Ignite session after the fire drill yesterday. A really,
Sorry
really
about
good...
that, by the way.
Was that your
Is
fault?
that you? A really, really great Ignite session on qualitative work. And I have been a huge fan of qualitative work, really my whole career. I really started in OD, which is super qualitative, but just the power of that. And there's so little qual work at SIOP represented. There's so few graduate programs that train you in qual work. And when I've had great qual work on my teams, a lot of times it's like because an anthropologist or social psychologist joined. And it's such a powerful tool, and particularly as more and more of the kind of quantitative things that we work on are getting automated, as ChatGPT can write our first drafts, like there's additional incremental unique benefit coming from deep rich. It totally is. Coming from really deep, rich qual work. And so I was tickled to see a very good, high quality session on basically the beauty of qualitative work as part of I/O.
That's really interesting perspective. Like if we go more like machine learning, AI, this sort of thing, you really lose the human element where...
Totally do.
Is that where like I/O is going to progress in the future?
So, yes, and I think a lot of it is really interesting in terms of those things that make a specific individual company or segment within a company unique. So if you've acquired a new company, if you're looking at intersectionality, if you're trying to figure out what makes a manager terrific, you're probably not actually going to find that in your employee survey results. You're not going to find it in how long they've been a manager. You're going to find it in behaviors that are probably not actually being quantified because it's the content of your one-to-one with that person rather than how frequently you have it, in all likelihood, because a one-to-one can also be abusive. So the opportunity to like layer in good qual work about what do extraordinarily good managers do, because we know they're important. How do I find them? How do I grow them? How do I nurture and reward and retain them?
Is there a possibility that with all the advances in generative AI that are going to come, that qual comes out the other side even stronger?
I hope so.
Not automated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's so much of it that's meaning making, and I'm not an expert in like Roberta or any of these, but the colleagues that I get to play with who are experts, even then, it's 80-90% good. So it's like the best graduate student of all time in terms of helping you code. But there's still...
Was this Roberta?
Roberta or some of the other NLP meaning making.
Gotcha.
Not a person, not a human. Sorry, who's this friend?
Super nerd.
Yeah, exactly. But there is still a lot of the meaning is at the edges, and the nuance at the edges, and I've been a super fan of NLP. I should go back and look, but I think I've been doing like NLP SIOP sessions for over a decade, right?
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because I definitely did one with Bill Macy before I joined Intel, and I left Microsoft 12 or 13 years ago, so it's definitely that long ago in the past.
Yeah. I can only imagine what those first sessions look like compared to now. You know?
Honestly, it's thrilling. Because before it was a lot of like counting keywords, right?
Yeah.
Just like really desiccated, and the richness of meaning we can get now. But we all know that NLP doesn't handle sarcasm very well, and it doesn't handle...
Neither do people, honestly.
But like it doesn't do very well with people who have English as a second language and use verb tenses in perhaps a non-standard way, or sentence structure in perhaps a non-standard way. And they're getting better, but there's also an awful lot of cultural meaning and nuance, and again, like what made that great manager different. Would I type something out that Roberta could understand, or is there going to be something in what my eyebrows do when you and I are having this conversation? It's like, oh, hey, wait, let's talk about that for a second, that you can get in deep qual work.
We'll edit that part out, the eyebrow part. Yeah.
Okay. I need you to help me out here.
Oh my gosh. Well, how about, so I thought the weirdest thing that was going to happen this week was I accidentally, not once, but twice, walked into the TechCrunch conference that was going on downstairs, or just not paying attention. I was like, wow, this is going to be the weirdest non-SIOP conference thing that's going to happen to me this week, until this morning.
Oh, what happened? Oh, with the superhero thing?
Well, Comic-Con's going on. I was like, who are all these crazy people outside?
I learned this because I was in line at the bathroom and someone from Comic-Con came in and I was like, oh, you're not an IO.
It's a dragon, right?
Something like that, yeah. I won't out someone for bathroom behavior, but it was definitely not coming from the nerd crowd.
All my good and bad fantasies came true this morning.
I showed...
It's too much information, Cole. He's like, stop and edit that one.
Yeah.
I showed Cole, I cornered two Spider-Men that were sitting out there, and I was like, you two got to point at each other. I need a photo of this. Like that meme. I have it, but we'll put it in the show notes.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll link to it for sure.
And I like the fact that it's Spider-Man and not Spider-Mans.
Oh.
Is it?
I'm not sure.
What is the proper plural
I think
tense?
it would be Spider-Man. I think it's Spider-Man.
Yeah. Or is it like attorneys general?
Well, that's the thing, right?
What is it? Spider's man. Yeah. Spider's man. It could be that.
Answering the important questions.
Yeah. We're tackling the hard issues here on Directionally Correct. Well, as people are kind of walking in, why don't we, I'm sure everybody that's here knows who you are, Alexis, but do you mind if I introduce you really quickly?
Sure.
So Alexis Fink is the VP of People Analytics and Workforce Strategy at Meta. She's the incoming SIOP president, and SIOP fellow, previously served in roles at Intel, Microsoft, amongst others, and a PhD in psychology from Old Dominion.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to say about yourself, Alexis, that I missed? Because I know that's really short. And you're a very distinguished person, and frankly very intimidating, so I'm glad to be sitting next to you.
Oh, well, now I'm all like blushy. Let's see. I am also a parent of 3 and a grandparent at this point, which is freaking me out.
Well done.
Thank you. I have a 1-year-old grandson. Freaking me out. He's not talking yet, so I don't have a grandma name yet, which is really my only saving grace.
What's it going to be?
Do you know?
Do you get to choose, or do they choose?
I think the first grandchild gets naming rights.
Yeah,
like whatever however he wraps himself around that, I think that's what I'm stuck with for all future children. We mentioned a little bit, like I started my career in OD. I honestly think that that's part of like what's good about my job. I was sort of lost in the woods for several years when I finished graduate school. I did a bunch of OD, I did a bunch of stuff like in operations and operations management, like in factories, and worked directly with leadership on making business decisions. And so when I kind of came back into the fold of IO, I had not only a bunch of like change management and culture tools, but also a real fluency with how business leaders make decisions, because I had been with them in the trenches for several years. And I really reflect frequently on how that little side wandering through the wilderness has played out very, very well as I've come back to Core IO.
Well, would you say that people analytics and OD are two sides to the same coin?
Did you read my chapter about that?
I think
I've cited the title.
I've cited it like 17 times in articles I've written, so I'm a big fan, obviously.
Well, if you look at a million years ago when like Six Sigma black belt training was cool, I went through that, and it was fascinating to me that if you look at like a Six Sigma sort of a string of steps, and then you look at like OD steps, and then you look at like research methods, they're kind of all the same. Some of them break out a step or two from one another, but the beginning, middle, and end are all the same. And I think that we do ourselves a real disservice by pretending that they're different.
Absolutely.
So like you've had like a circuitous route. Like, how did you get into IO?
Yeah.
So I am super lucky. Like a lot of people, it was mostly accidental. I was living, my parents lived in Singapore when I was a kid in college. And my family was very distressed that I was a psychology major, really convinced that I was going to end up tending bar. My dad would probably be listening to this. I still like to be like, hey, this psych major turned out okay. But
did you ever tend bar?
I did not ever tend bar, no. It's kind of a missed opportunity.
Career. I mean,
it could be. Like, it could really be a retirement hustle for me. But it turned out
after
that...
AI takes over.
I know. We'll have little robot people like the movie...
The Minions?
Different one, but we'll leave it alone. But on the third floor of my apartment building was this woman, my parents' apartment building, was this woman who had a master's degree in IO. And my father was desperately trying to make sure that I'm going to be employable as an adult. And so we had a January term in my college and sort of, did some matchmaking, like, we'll go work with this person. She seems to be a psychology degree that seems to have a job. Why don't you do that? And I reflected last year that this was in January of 1992. And so I had my first IO psychology job in January of 1992. So I've been doing this for literally 30 years.
My goodness.
And I was like, I found it. This is it. It's psychology, it's work, it seems important and interesting, and I was just hook, line, and sinker from the word go.
People.
Right, well, I get to like study people, but not actually have to talk to them, and sometimes that's fun.
Back to the qualitative research.
That's right, I can sit here with my spreadsheets and like be comforted.
Absolutely. Well, when in your perspective, when did people analytics become a thing, and when did you become a part of that in addition to IO psychology?
So I usually peg the start of people analytics to the Thomas Davenport 2010 competing on people analytics, right? Like, I'm clearly not making that up. That really was a pivot point when other people found it to be interesting. What's amusing is I was in a team at Microsoft, which is a people analytics team going way, way back, and I joined that team in 2005 and was a people research scientist. So it was clearly already people analytics. It had a very similar charter. In fact, I loved the charter of that team. We were really the R&D shop for everything in HR.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So whatever we were fussing with in HR, it kind of came through this people research team, which was a great way to touch lots and lots of things. And then we would get it basically to like a beta and then ship it out to whoever the long-term parent would be. And I thought that was a nice opportunity. So I index the term people analytics with the Davenport article. My professional, like real people analytics job was in 2005. And then before that, I was doing things where I was applying IO psychology principles just because it's like a reflex and you can't not do it.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in a job that people would look at me and say that's a PA job.
Where is people analytics? Where's the boundaries of that? Like, is it dashboards? We don't like dashboard research typically here at SIOP.
So I'm a little more expansive, I think, than most. The team that I have the privilege to run at Facebook now, I describe as occupying the full three-dimensional space of people analytics, right? So think back to your 10th grade geometry. We've got this x-axis that's the whole employee life cycle. And we go all the way to talent analytics, so what's happening in the market, who's got which skills. My team at Intel did that as well. So if you think about Toby Colshaw's new book, Talent Analytics, which talks about the labor market stuff. So we do all that kind of cool stuff. And then through all the recruiting and selection research, and those are two different things, right? Selection is the decisions, recruiting is more about business process, and then all the onboarding and the diversity and the engagement and the movement and sort of all the things that we would classically think of, plus going out to exit. And then think about your y-axis, and I think about that as levels of aggregation. Right? So sometimes you're thinking about very small groups. You might be thinking of like intersectionality among, tech black women or something. So from very, very small to very, very large, we're going all the way back out to whole labor markets, whole countries, et cetera. And then if you really remember your 10th grade geometry, there's a z-axis that comes out the front.
Oh yeah, it's the 3 dimensions.
Thank you. And I think about the z-axis.
Can I make a quick infomercial?
Yes.
Never make a 3D chart. They're uninterpretable for your audience.
Unless you can animate it.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
If you can animate them and rotate them, that can be cool, but yeah, they're uninterpretable. I've been trying to draw my three-dimensional model for like 6 years now. I can't do it. I'm not an artist, and also they don't translate well in flatness. But that z-axis that comes out the front is the level of analytic complexity. And so I'm really delighted that on my team, we have everything from data governance, like defining what variables we'll use and where they rest and which ones inherit values from what systems, through counting and like clever counting. And there's a huge amount of counting and clever counting in the universe, data visualization and display, all the way through we don't actually do Bayesian analysis, but it would be on the list if it was there. But all of your sort of frequentist kinds of analysis through predictive and then finally into prescriptive analysis. Here's what you should do. And so we get to play in that whole three-dimensional space. And it's just, for me, those are kind of the bounds. Right?
It's great to have like data governance under the hood because
super great.
Like that's becoming like a larger and larger issue. GDPR, New York, California.
Yep.
I would argue it's probably nearly impossible to be a progressive people analytics function if you don't have it under you now.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And the amount of time, there are like two secret weapons that this current PA team has, and my last PA team at Intel, which is amazing, also have, that I think people don't appreciate how much efficiency and power you get from them. One of them is data governance, and just knowing like what you have, what you can trust, who inherits from where, which database you hit, like all of that control mechanism, if you will. And then the other is all the data engineering stuff, right? If you want to be successful, go find yourself a data engineer. The amount of speed and efficiency and accuracy you can get through having really just like beautiful hygienic data at your fingertips.
They're worth gold, aren't they?
Oh my God, maybe more than their weight in gold. Like I don't know what, like plutonium or something. Whatever is more valuable than gold, that's the D's.
It's like the good old days, like pass around like an Excel sheet. That's your database.
Those days are still the days.
Those days are still the days.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't want to disparage spreadsheets. I kind of live in spreadsheets, right? And they're super useful if you're going to do something once. They're super useful if you're back of the napkining something. I do spreadsheets to calm down when I'm anxious. It's a little bit of like maybe more information than you needed, like recreational spreadsheeting.
Recreational spreadsheets.
Yeah, I know. You people don't know.
Please tell your children about recreational spreadsheeting.
So I don't want to disparage that. And Excel has amazing tools. There's a lot that you can do sort of really quickly that's useful. But if you're going to do something more than once, like don't do it in a spreadsheet. Come on.
I used to work with someone that loved to do like data cleaning in Excel, and I was telling him like, if you ever make a mistake, we're never going to be able to recreate this. Yeah. Never be able to recreate this. Need to learn how to program in some capacity.
Something. Yep.
Absolutely. Do you mind if we come back to your career here for a second?
How about it?
And can I be like a little bit of a fanboy?
Oh God.
So, two things that I really admire about you, and I want you to have the platform to talk about publicly. One is being a female leader at SIOP and how you have come up and just really taken our field forward. And the second is the ability to be a practitioner who's also a SIOP fellow and the incoming president of SIOP, which is not, historically speaking, a very round of applause from the audience. you're pulling our field forward, one dead body at a time or something like that. So first of all, thank you. But can you talk about that at all, Alexis? Because I have a feeling there's quite a few people in the audience, not just in the room, but that are going to listen to this later that would love to learn from you about it.
Oh, golly,
it's a big old question.
That's really hairy. So let's do the female leader thing first. I think some of it is, even like as a kid, I didn't really let people put me in the girl box, right? So, and I have to give a shout out to my dad and to his dad, who were just enormously supportive. My grandmother went back and got a master's degree when her youngest child hit kindergarten, and there are just not that many women who were born in 1912 that did that. And God bless my grandpa was like, no, I'll step up and do the kids. Changed jobs, became a high school teacher so that he'd have the rights. Just really super, super fortunate to have that role modeling in my life. And then we got a computer in 77, 78, when I was 7 years old.
That's early.
I know, right? My dad was
Gates.
Well, I mean, let's not
like
be
a
crazy.
mainframe in the house.
It was those of you who are old, remember the Tandy Radio Shack 80? We had a color computer, it had 4K. My dad was an engineer at Delco Electronics, and he and his buddies souped it up to 16K. It was one of the most powerful personal computers. And I was 7, and my dad made me learn how to code. And then I was fortunate to live in Asia, where as a freshman in high school, I got to take computer science and learn how to code. Oh, wow. And then I took it in college, and I took it in graduate school. And so from the time I was tiny, I was writing code, and there was sort of never you need to stay in the girl box. And my dad was working at this semiconductor manufacturing factory, and I remember him bringing me when I was really little to tour factories and be you can do this stuff. So it sort of never dawned on me that I was going to, not do things.
Yeah.
So I'm actually just really, really fortunate in that way.
Massive amount of exposure. Sounds like
super
everything.
Lucky.
Yeah.
And I sort of joke that I've kind of been in management training since I was 5. So if I didn't get somewhere, what a failure. So that's just sheer dumb luck of where you happen to get dropped down on the planet, right? And then the other bit is it took me a really long time to get less stubborn. And I've been in a couple of jobs where there was just no way to succeed. It was just, you were in a hole, there was somebody who was not going to like you, and there was no succeeding at all.
This was not the answer I was expecting.
Thank you.
Please say more about this.
And when I was young and arrogant and stubborn, I would just grind away at it because you're not going to win. And I later realized, and I was close to 40 when I realized this, a bit of a slow learner, I think, that the calories it was going to take me to take an unwinnable situation and get it just to neutral were so poorly spent. And I could take those same calories and start in more fruitful soil and really do something great with it. And so I really worked hard on getting over my shame of being a quitter and being if I have a finite number of calories, I don't want to try to, there's sort of this analogy of bloom where you're planted. It's right, but if where you're planted is in the middle of a sidewalk, you're probably not going to bloom. Let me go find some nice, composty soil. Yeah. I'm going to stop fighting nature and trying to bloom on this stupid sidewalk in the middle of this highway. I'm going to go over here where it's there's sunlight and water and nice loamy dark dirt and whatnot. And once I sort of figured out that it was okay to say this is not a winnable situation and this is a poor use of my time and energy on the planet, I was able to sort of, I think, get past some of the things that previously had mired me down.
Well, what are some of those hallmarks? I mean, you got a bunch of people here. They're trying to make their way in their career, either in grad school or, early career. What should they look out for? What should they...
One of them is a toxic boss, and I want to caveat this with a huge asterisk because Morgan McCall, who some of you may remember, the guy who basically invented high potential development, I will have to send him this podcast to be flattered I mentioned him. He reflects on the fact that the research shows that one of the best development experiences you can have is working for a horrible boss. So you don't want to quit immediately.
Yes.
But you also don't want to just stay there forever with somebody who hates your guts. And needs to see you fail to prop up their own ego. Like, that's not a healthy time. Like, learn a little from them and then get the heck out of Dodge. And there's a sweet spot in finding that, right? And sometimes you can't control it. The time it happened to me, both times it happened to me, I got reorganized under this person, and I was like, I can turn this around. I'm likable.
Right.
No, I did not. It's not successful. So it's like you give it the college try. It's like I'm using a good faith effort, and then one of them really was insistent that I do something that was illegal. At first I'm like, oh, but you just aren't aware of the uniform guidelines. Let me educate you. And then I'd embarrass this person, and then it's like, it's like, you're going to do it anyway. And I'm like, but I'm not going to go to jail. And anyway, it got really ugly. So I left that job because I'm like, this is not worth I'm not going to be deposed over this. Sorry,
right.
Peace out, yo. So some of it is like finding that sweet spot, but it's like I'm not a quitter, but also there's the motivational posters that were really popular like in the 80s or 90s?
Hang in there.
There's a great set of demotivational posters, and one of them says something along the lines of like, winners never quit and quitters never win, but those who never quit and never win are just idiots. So I'm like, okay, find the balance, and then also don't waste your time on the planet.
This is what Duckworth doesn't tell you, right?
Right. There's like the other one of those that I'll just give you.
We got one left for Joy Oliver. Thanks for coming, Joy.
There's grit, and then there's just like self-flagellation. Yeah. So there you go.
Awesome.
And then maybe the SIOP thing. I'll tell you that I maybe mid-career was definitely into my 30s, and was getting divorced, and I was kind of like needed an emotional life raft. And SIOP was my emotional life raft.
Aww.
And it's like, I can, like, work was really hard, and family was really hard, and, like, things were just hard. And I got myself sort of put on a SIOP committee, and it's like, but I like all of these people, and we can do a thing, and at the end, that thing is really good, and also there's not going to be a performance evaluation that points out all the ways I could have done it better. So it was like nothing but upside. And then like that led to the next one, and that led to the next one, and then like you get invited to be in a panel, and then you meet different people because of the panel, and then you organize one, and it sort of like becomes a flywheel of goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
all the way up until this moment.
all the way up until this moment. Right.
We're right here right now.
And then, like, I had, a few years ago, I had a moment where I was a little bit bored at work, and it turns out that when people ask you to write a book, it's super honoring. You're just like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, me? Really? You get very excited, and then, like, you're high for about 15 minutes, and you say yes, and you sign the contract, and then you realize, shit, this is like 10,000 hours of unpaid work. What have I done? Yeah. But then you've agreed, and because you're not a quitter, you just like do it, and you give up every night and weekend for years, and meanwhile your family's like, Mama, we miss you. But then it's done, and you're like, woohoo, I can put book covers on my LinkedIn profile, and your parents are really proud, and you get to dedicate a book to the people you love, and you're like, this is awesome. And then you've got that like on your resume forever, so there you go.
Is that employee sensing and surveys, or investing in people, or something
Employee
else?
sensing and surveys was harder.
Yeah.
Investing in people, because Wayne Cassio and John Boudreau are both
Rock stars.
Amazing, wonderful, kind, competent people. And it was an existing book we were updating. Like, I wrote a few brand new chapters and then updated a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. That was not as hard. Okay. But employee sensing and surveys ended up being like twice as long as we intended, and that was a lot.
I think people have the same orientation to like SIOP submissions. Like, hey, like you feel really good in September when you submit. It's like, oh shit, we actually
have to do this. Right, exactly.
See, this is why they put us as the last session on Saturday.
Although, do you have the same experience? I was in a session that was kind of dragging a little bit earlier today, and I laid out, here are the like 5 sessions I want to do next year. We need one that looks like this, and here's the outline, and here are the people I think I want to ask. And, we need to do like the counterpoint of that, and it'll look like this, and like I already caught somebody in the escalator. It's like, hey, I have this idea. So do you obsessively plan next year's things during the conference?
I have general ideas, and here I'll hit you with one right now. Okay. So talking to various people at bars and stuff, as one does. Like you run into situations where like, oh my God, Cole, you know Alexis.
Yeah.
How do you know each other? And I want to run like a network analysis across.
I really do. I actually want someone to run a network analysis. A panel just was formed
next year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, of the SIOP community.
Of the SIOP community, and all the ways that you'd have to go through like the last maybe 20 years of programs to see all the people who've done sessions with each other. And there's that probably exists somewhere. Or maybe there's an academic who has them all in your office. If that's true, that'd be great. The digital ones would be better. I don't know how well we've saved them.
You're talking about like a passive survey.
Yeah, baby.
I like that.
This is what we need generative AI for, is to be able to query all that in.
Yes. Maybe generative AI attached to a fax machine from when we drop the old paper ones in. If somebody can do that, I'd be really impressed.
But, well, I mean, I have volunteered on committees. I someday aspire to hand out badges at registration. But you
can do that.
It's aspirational. But like you chose to be a fellow.
Yeah.
So
do you choose to be a fellow?
So yes, there's a whole process. A couple of years ago, right pre-pandemic, we ran a SIOP session on like how to be a fellow, particularly how to be a fellow as a practitioner. Got Nancy Tippins, who's freaking amazing on it, and awesome. Derek Avery, who's also amazing on it. It's like really, really good folks. And I was just on the fellows committee, so it evaluated those packets. You have to do a self-nomination, you have to turn in your CV, and then a person who's already a fellow has to write a nice letter about you and the things you've done, and then you have to get a few other letters that say you've had a big impact. And the deal is, for practitioners in particular, the barrier is usually you can't just be good at your job. It can't just be like, I did this thing and I'm super awesome and my clients like me, right? It has to have some kind of meaningful impact on the community. And there are a variety of ways in which you can do that.
Yeah.
Right. So there's you can do it through science. Like, I developed this theory that changed the way we think about something. In practice, it can be like, wow, again, maybe I developed this theory, or I developed an instrument, or I developed a consulting approach, or whatever, and then it's a little bit easier for external consultants, because then they can do it for like maybe millions of people. But for internal consultants, we've actually had quite a few come through. I was an internal consultant as well. The stuff I got it for was actually all the competency stuff that I did, and also I was the chair of the IT survey group for a while, which had like 1 million employees that we got to do with engagement stuff. So it's like, hey, you've really done a bunch of good stuff around competencies that then did get published and other people use it, and you've done all this stuff with engagement, and that got spread across all these other companies and like touched 1 million employees. You don't have to do it to that degree, but you have to have something that people who've never met you would be like, oh, I know that guy. And they helped elevate our field, our profession. They also have them for service and for teaching and for even administration. So there are a lot of ways you can do it. The main criterion is, did you elevate the field? Is SIOP better? SIOP, not just your company, but is SIOP better because you're here?
Yeah, you have to have the giving back orientation, it sounds like.
Well, you can actually be an arrogant jerk, I think, but you have to. I mean,
there's hope. That. Thank you.
I thought the letter of recommendation was going to be the tough part. Yeah. I was fixated on that.
But you have to have contributed to the science, to the practice. You have to have contributed to the community and made the community better in a way that it's demonstrable, in a way that's identifiable.
I mean, this comes to like the sciences practitioner model here.
Totally. Yeah.
And like, I think we're getting better. You touched on this earlier.
Yeah. I think we are.
Well, can I kind of jump into that vein from the scientist practitioner point? I don't think this is going to be a controversial question, but do you think that SIOP can or should become the premier people analytics conference?
Yeah. Honestly, I think we already are. Because I've been to a bunch of the other people analytics conferences, not all and not every year, but I've been to them, and like, we wipe the floor with their content. Like, it's so
She's throwing shade.
I super am. I mean, love a good people analytics world, love the Wharton People Analytics Conference, but like the richness and the diversity and the incredible volume of content that's here, it's 5,000 people who are all the same kind of nerd that you are.
That's true.
Like, it's amazing. And so when we did the People Analytics Conference in, I think it was 2016, for the LEC.
Yeah, that's where I met you.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was thrilled with that because we used all of the science of what we as a field know about writing, about building good learning experiences. So the way the curriculum flowed, I thought was really good. And the way we blended a little bit of academics with real practice examples, and the way we made sure to sample like classic industrials, with high tech, with government, the way we threw some lawyers at you to make sure the ethics were good, we threw all kinds of other things in there in a way that were really, really curated. I think, frankly, SIOP needs to do a little bit more of that, so stay tuned.
I heard from a little birdie that that might be coming back. Is there any truth to that?
Well, the EB meets tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't think making a decision there is on the agenda, but I may get in trouble for this, but pre-pandemic, when I was portfolio and conference officer, I know, you're such an instigator, the SIOP board had actually approved an annual People Analytics conference as part of the SIOP portfolio.
Can we get a round of applause for that, please? We need to show them that is valued and wanted, so thank you.
And we had a venue picked out, we had contracts signed, and then the pandemic happened. And so it sort of went off. And then SIOP had, it was financial anxiety. But one of the things I would really like to bring back is have that practitioner-focused People Analytics conference, as well as really do a better job with pulling that into our main conference in the spring.
That's what I was trying to tee you up for.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm super excited. I'm so glad to hear that.
I really, really want to make it happen. And we got there once before. We just got wrecked by the pandemic, so I think we can get there again.
Cole was so stoked for this conference. You rented a suite at the Marriott, like at a full, went all out.
No, that's what happens when you get in at 1 a.m. and it's the last room available. Well, so do you feel like, just to stay on the vein of being controversial, do you feel like there's any walls that need to be torn down between People Analytics and SIOP?
So I wouldn't characterize it as a wall because I don't know the extent to which it was intentionally constructed and guarded. I do think that we as a community of IO psychologists can sometimes be a little bit insular, and those of us who work in organizations know that the vast majority of people doing this work are not IOs.
Yep.
And when you're coming up through school, or when you're in a consulting group, or when you're an academic, you sort of lose sight of the fact that most of the people carrying water on this stuff are folks that we would think of as sort of gifted amateurs about IO psychology specifically. They're very capable in the thing that they do, right? They're very capable as data scientists, they're very capable as engineers, they're very capable as IT professionals, they're great learning development professionals, they've been great OD people, they are killer spreadsheet jockeys, they're like fantastic at things, and things that are valuable, but the sort of IO psychology piece of having the deep content expertise with a scientific orientation, the sort of methodologies, the standards, the language we use to describe things, like an IO psychologist will use validation in a different way than a data scientist will use the word validation, and it's one of those things where NLP gets you in trouble, right? Because we both use the word validation and the meaning attached to it is different, right? So like those things we have to resolve. I don't think, like, there was not a grand conspiracy to be like, hey, you guys in data science, use validation for a different word. Like, use that to mean, it wasn't intentionally constructed to box them out, right? I do think that we are at risk. We are at risk if we don't recognize the impact and the opportunity that's ahead of us to be more inclusive with all of our co-travelers who are coming from different places.
Yes.
And there is a tension because for a lot of people, we're at the SIOP conference, for a lot of people, SIOP is special. And there were barriers to entry to getting in here. And there, like, we have shared experience in graduate school, and there's sort of a almost tribal thing to it, right? And there are people who legitimately don't want to lose that. And so part of our challenge is to figure out, and I'm like staring directly at Amit Mohindra right now, who's a non-IO, but is certainly an honorary person of the
previous
leader.
Podcast guest.
That's right, a leader in People Analytics. How do we make sure that SIOP is the intellectual home for those people doing this work independent of the channel? And here comes Richard Rose now, speaking of like non-IOs who are like totally killing it. How can we be the intellectual home for talking about ethics and talking about high quality methods and all of these things without sacrificing the sort of intimacy that we get as a community who share things, right? So how do we figure out a way to support and include without making it anonymous, right? How do we not become AOM, which is overwhelming to me? I went one time and I was just like, oh, it felt like tiny and small, and I had to go home, and it was very overwhelming. How do we not do that, but also make sure that we are bringing in those people who are really doing the work? And it's work that we care about. We're all here trying to use science to make work and workplaces better.
You're right. We need more happy hours. I agree. Well, we actually have a new segment that we wanted to unveil just for you.
Oh, dear God.
Here at SIOP. So would you like to join this new segment? It's got a really clever name, Scott.
This is the confusion matrix. And
oh, boy.
Talk about
it's got a reaction.
A double entendre.
Yeah, baby.
It's got a reaction. So your task is to pick a number. We have a variety of different topics.
Okay, I'm just like 7.
Oh, okay.
All right.
You're already going. Okay.
You told me to pick a number.
Scott's not ready.
Oh, okay. This is wild.
Okay.
Oh boy, is this like the thing where it's a song in a different musical style, except it's topical?
We could do that if you
no,
want.
please.
If you want.
Please don't.
But the topic that you chose was the most ridiculous thing you've ever done for love.
Oh God.
You chose it.
Could I draw again? The most ridiculous thing I ever did for love was move 3,000 miles away.
To where?
From the East Coast to the West Coast. From Norfolk, Virginia to Woodinville, Washington.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Abandoned, my
what was the story behind this?
Yeah, you gotta give us a little bit.
My husband was from the Pacific Northwest, and he was like, we have to get home. And I was like, but that's not where I'm from. He's like, yeah, but we have to. He's like, okay, I'll find a job. And so it has turned out well.
Yeah.
At the time I was thinking maybe really questioning my judgment, but it has turned out well. The West Coast has been good to me.
Everything has led you to this moment.
Everything has led me to this moment.
Yeah.
There you go, as it is.
West Coast is the best coast.
Well, honestly, I live in Oregon now, and like commercial for the Oregon Tourism Board. It's a beautiful state. It's just gorgeous. I live like 90 minutes from the ski hill, 90 minutes from the ocean.
Yes.
It's nice.
I will say the time change to Boston has been super rough.
Yeah, that kind of sucked. Yeah. Thank you for the confirmation. That's really helpful.
That was a fantastic answer.
Okay.
But I think it's time for the nerdery.
Do you want to join us in the nerdery?
Let's do it. It's my happy place.
So we were really excited to talk. I don't know if excited is the right word. I am very curious about this new. I think it's still open for commentary right now in the IOP Journal from Paul Sackett talking about his 2022 article. It's called "Revisiting the Design of Selection Systems in Light of New Findings Regarding the Validity of Widely Used Predictors." And I've got it for folks on video or who are in the room. I've got the abstract on the screen. Are you familiar with this, first of all, just before we get into it?
I am, and I'm crushed that I didn't get to go see Sackett's presentation yesterday morning. I had something else I had to be at. Did you guys go to that?
We did not. We're trying to get him on the pod right now.
You should.
To talk about it in particular, but we're not going to stomp on that too much.
Okay.
Can I just kind of set the... This is going to be like really wild that I'm saying this. Doesn't science sometimes move forward one funeral at a time?
So, yes, everybody knows. I mean, that's a thing. But I'm so thrilled by this because... Like, we're smarter now. I'm actually kind of tickled that the corrections, it's like, oh, if you give up the corrections, you actually get these much better estimates. But also, because I always try to under-promise and over-deliver, I don't really like using corrections because then I feel like I'm a fear of, like, over-promising. Plus, we know that anything we do in a sterile environment, you're going to lose like half of your effect size by the time it gets out into the wild. So anything I can do to like undercall something and still seem like good, this totally validates that as would have been the right strategy in the first place.
Well, can I pull back your excitement just for a second?
Oh, man.
For the folks who aren't familiar with what these corrections are that you're talking about, what are these corrections? And just to kind of set the scene, this is in relation to correcting some of the effect sizes from the original Schmidt and Hunter meta-analysis that is one of the seminal articles of our field, and then what are the implications of those corrections?
Absolutely.
I feel like I'm in quals.
No, it's fine. Well,
Sweating bullets.
Essentially, it's like making predictive corrections to concurrent data, which is, they argue is inappropriate.
Right. So the deal is there are a couple of different ways you can do selection research, right? You can do it predictively, where you gather stuff at time 1 and then you gather stuff at time 2, or you can do it concurrently. And you'll have different types of data available, whether you've got candidate data or only employee data. And the original Schmidt-Hunter work did not, it didn't account for those different methods.
Yeah.
And instead applied a correction that would have been appropriate, and they applied that correction too broadly because they weren't indexing. And as a result, they overestimated the impact of some of the features, most notably, G, or generalized intelligence, is not quite as awesome as we thought it was. Like, this is not to dog on G, but it is actually really gratifying as a person who's spent a lot of my life like defending and building structured interviews. It was really gratifying to see structured interviews like coming out as pretty awesome.
Well, and one of the points, and again, I don't want to step on this too much because I want to talk to it in more detail with Paul Sackett, but contributing to the diversity-validity trade-off. Yeah. And how many times have we cycled around this problem over the last 30 years? And maybe those cycles weren't, I mean, it's not like they weren't valid, it wasn't time well spent, but maybe we can get out of that debate because some of the things... What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
So, some predictive measures are shown to have disparate impact more often than others. Structured interviews isn't one of those things, generally speaking, and therefore we don't have to do so much hand-wringing now that we've done in the past. If, again, maybe there'll be a correction 30 years from now based on Paul Sackett's work, who knows, but in that 30 years we can at least sleep a little easier at night.
I like to get around that. Like you see like Pareto optimal sort of solutions where it essentially works out like 5% cognitive ability, like 95% personality. And I think one of the most interesting things that he writes in this article is that there have not been able to recreate these results in practical applications. So it's very intuitive at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you want to talk about the next topic?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Pull it up.
All right. We got... And one of the things that we do on this podcast is we steal from Ethan Mollick at Wharton. Every episode we steal from him. So if he's listening out there, come join us on the podcast. We'd love to have you. We talk about you all the time.
Just a final note on that, on the Sackett article. This absolutely wrecked my world because that was one of my favorite citations, the Schmidt-Hunter.
I remember we had an episode on here earlier with some academic we had on, and they asked us what our article that we remember the most from graduate school. I think we both cited that article.
Do you have a favorite citation?
Actually, Schmidt-Hunter is one of the ones I've gone to a lot.
Yes.
Like Guzzo and Shea. Like, there's a bunch that I go to pretty frequently.
Barrick and Mount.
Yep.
Barrick and Mount.
Yep.
Well, Scott, do you want to tee up?
Yeah,
we're talking about Google Scholar.
So Google Scholar. So this is a really interesting study. So they investigated 6 different sources of citation. So Google Scholar, Microsoft Academic, Scopus, Dimensions, Web of Science, and Open Citations, which I never use anything but Google Scholar. Absolutely. I never actually heard of some of these. But they identified 3 million citations. They searched for them in these different platforms. And Google Scholar identified 88% of them. I don't think they had a PDF for all of them, but at least had them in there. The next one available was Microsoft Analytics, second place, about 60% of citations. But the overall, takeaway is it's really scary that we rely on a free tool, Google Scholar, for a lot of our searching history.
See, my mind, just because I've been using GPT-4 so much recently, I paid the $20, yes, I'm the guy, and I feel like I haven't even thought about Google Scholar since I've started doing that. Does that make sense? Because when I go out,
it's just a paradigm changer. Change the way you look for articles.
If you use and these aren't complicated prompts, they're going to teach you prompt engineering and all that stuff. It's just ask it a question about our research and just say include citations, and it's really fucking good. It's so good.
I find that
I argue with it. I like arguing. It's fun.
What do you mean?
Debating with. Say, give me the top 10 reasons or top 10 things that you could use to help you improve your selection system. Okay. And you say, I disagree with number 4. Can you find research to the opposite effect of what number 4 is saying of these top 10 reasons? And it'll bring articles back. Here's 5 more articles that actually have the opposite finding of what you found. I'm like, this is freaking amazing.
I well, we could go on a ChatGPT tangent if you want. But
I know it's been going on all conference,
Yeah.
but the people that are listening to the podcast haven't heard all of that. So.
Yeah.
Well, I find that ChatGPT 3 like hallucinates. They'll bring up citations that don't exist.
They don't exist.
And that, so you gotta be like really careful there. I wonder, like, is there like a selection bias in the Google Scholar library? Like the PDFs available. Joy and I have talked about this in the past. Like you look for that one PDF that you can actually download. Like, is that a selective sample and that just becomes like the citations that everyone uses? I don't know.
I'm not sure if that's true. I do know that because I was on the Fellows Committee, so I spent a bunch of time like looking up how many citations did you actually have, what was your age index, et cetera. And I found really different citation counts and age indices depending on which I was using. And Google Scholar, I don't know if it was the most accurate because maybe it was hallucinating or like having a bot that was like extra citing or whatever else, but they were really different answers. And so Google Scholar at least gave me the highest counts. I think every time I tried to look this stuff up when I'm trying to validate, like, are you really influential?
Yeah.
But I did not try. I was doing this in November, so ChatGPT wasn't out yet.
Tell me this. As a practitioner, how much stock do you put into things like age indices?
I don't,
Okay.
because the architecture of them is not actually tied to practical implication necessarily. If there's a few people who cite each other constantly and they produce a lot of things, like you
Citation
make
mills.
exactly.
Yes.
So you can like anything else, you can manipulate it.
Yeah.
So I don't put as much credit on those, although it is sort of a vague index of do other people seem to think you're important. That's like one of many criteria you look at.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about on this one, Scott?
Well, I mean, we could talk about ChatGPT and like how it's going to influence the way we write. Like, what does it mean for grad schools? Like,
Yeah,
all
Alexis,
this sort
you're
of stuff.
a soothsayer. Tell us, what does the future hold? Come on.
Is it scary or is it promising?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I have so far loved playing with these tools, including the Microsoft Bing one for doing search. I've loved playing with them as first drafts. I have been a little anxious about the hallucination.
Yes.
A bunch of my academic friends a week or two ago got really excited by like, oh, write my obituaries or write bios for me. And like Lisa Finkelstein was like, they invented awards I never got. It was like, it's kind of nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Extra awards.
Yes.
Make me look more important. Nice.
Write me a fellow.
Right, and I'm anxious about the hallucinations, and I think that we'll get better at those things, and we will figure out ways to do it. I'm also, I'm so torn because almost any tool can be used for evil or good, right? Somebody asked me last night, like, what did I think about the AI ability to synthesize someone's voice? Right? And there's some like really scary scams going on where it sounds like it's your loved one's voice calling you. And that's terrifying. And that is scary. On the other hand, the New York Times this morning had a thing about how that exact same technology is being used to basically make a voice bank for people with ALS or throat cancer or something else so that they don't have like somebody else's voice speaking for them when they use technology after they've medically lost the ability to speak, right? So one of those is very good, one of those is very bad. They're exactly the same technology. And so I'm worried about that. I am worried. I have kids in college right now. I'm worried
Their
that...
papers just got a lot better.
Well, honestly, I'm worried about that, though, because the reason I'm excited to have my kids in college is because I want them to learn how to think. And college isn't really about facts. It's about learning how to think. And I'm worried that they'll get lazy and not have to go through this stuff. And there is genuine value in wrestling with ideas and
putting in the time, reading the full article, get the context.
And figuring out what you think about something.
Yes.
Figuring out how things connect. Because even if it turns out that all we're doing is, childcare, healthcare, and elder care, like that's the only work left for humans or something, there's still, there's meaning making and human connection. And if the things that humans are fundamentally wired to do is really connect, then there's thoughtfulness that has to go into that so that we can do that effectively.
I think that's a really scary thing for I.O. Like if, we have all this generative technology and like, unfortunately, a bunch of jobs go away. What do people do? How do they derive meaning from life?
So
there's no work.
I'm a super big history nerd.
Okay.
I know that shocks you. But if
Not at all.
I know. If you think about,
You like a bunch of recommendations for presidential biographies.
I did. They're good though, right? I can't help it. But if you look backwards in time to the various previous revolutions, like, oh, what about the printing press? All the monks will be out of work. What about the steam engine? What about sort of all of these other revolutions? What we've essentially done is gotten rid of work that was dangerous, or gotten rid of work that was boring. And like when the monks were hand transcribing, Bibles, there weren't any marketing analysts, and there were no semiconductor engineers, right? That wasn't a thing. And so as we find space, there's sort of a thing about like water finds its level.
Yeah.
And as we are freed up from having to go back and look things up in order to write a list, and there's really very little intellectual value of, making a list out of the things, what new thing will we find to fill that time? And for decades ago, there was sort of this idea of like we'd be at like a 15-hour work week and we'd have all this leisure and whatever else, and somehow we haven't managed to make that happen. And if history is any guide, we're not suddenly going to get real enlightened and also all only be working 15 hours a week. So I think that we will be surprised by the new things that are possible when we are sort of, air quotes, freed from drudgery.
Yeah. Well, can I go back to kind of the original point you're making? Because you're talking about essentially you're worried about your college age child.
Kids.
And how do you build critical thinking? So how do you build critical thinking in the age of AI?
So one of the kids his critical thinking is he took his high school graduation money and bought a non-functioning Miata, and he spent the last several years like tearing it down or swapping out the transmission, putting things back together. And he's developed all of his critical thinking skills with basically a very expensive Lego project.
Yeah.
Actually, not that expensive if you think about Legos. It probably was saving me money that he was doing it on the Miata and not on actual Lego sets, because those things can be outrageous. And then the other one is really involved in theater. And so, that's a lot of very practical problem solving and human tasks and human conflict resolution. And in February, he and a bunch of other kids had written a play and how do you negotiate who's doing what and what's taking what role and what sets are we going to create. And so it was very much creative tasks. And so for both of them were different types of creative tasks, but they were embodied physical human creative tasks that taught them skills, but also gave them gratification. So I think that there's lots of that. I tend to be nerdy, and so I read, but I also bake and garden and dig in the dirt and these kinds of things. And there's also problem solving in that, or pursuing athletic sports or athletic pursuits or whatever else. So I think there's lots and lots of places to learn sophistication, to learn tenacity, to learn problem solving, to learn humility. A lot of these things.
You have to supplement at that point, though, right? I mean, should ChatGPT be taught in grad programs, because it's a tool. It's like the printing press or anything else.
Totally.
It's come along.
So when I was in graduate school at the time when statistics programs were really coming into their own, right?
You can't use a calculator.
You were doing a bunch of long divisional.
Yes.
We did.
Yeah.
Exactly. We had to write things out longhand to 6 significant digits, and it was torture. Yeah. But we also had a computer lab where you could do the work, which is why he made us write every single iteration if you're rotating your factor analyses by hand. That's a special form of punishment.
Yeah.
And
I don't really need that orthogonal rotation anymore.
But what was interesting is because I had to do the matrix algebra, I have an intuitive sense of what happens when you're messing with these error terms, or what does it really mean to have these be orthogonal, or what does this do? And I don't do it now, but I'm glad I had the experience of doing it a few times, because I've processed my partner really likes to watch math and science YouTube, and so we watch video animations of interesting math.
You are a nerd.
I know, right?
This is how you become a SIOP fellow.
There's some really terrific, if you go down the rabbit hole of math and science YouTube, Veritasium and 3 Brown 1 Blue, and some of these guys are just freaking great. But because I have manually done that matrix algebra, I know what's happening inside of it in a way that I think makes me a little bit less vulnerable to, I typed a command, R did a thing, it must be right.
Yeah.
And I worry about that more. The people are just sort of using it like a 2-year-old with a chainsaw.
I think we have one more topic here. I think Cole's pulling it up right now. There's no real preamble to it. It's just essentially, we're all familiar with Better Poster, right?
Yes.
Right. So essentially,
I'm trying to put it up real quick. Sorry.
Straight to the point poster.
There you go.
I saw a few.
I did. I saw some better ones. Yeah.
Very encouraging.
Yeah. The poster sessions I walked through were still like 90% wall of words.
Yes.
But I saw us doing a little bit more of this that's a little bit more inviting. I will say that as a scientist and hyper nerd, I do like having that left rail of here's the stuff.
Yeah.
Like I really do know what I'm talking about. Like invite me into at the nerd level, like back up what I'm saying. But I do really like this sort of more inviting platform. Elizabeth McCune, who recently left Microsoft, had done fantastic work internally with infographics as a way to convey information in a way that's like grabby. And I am a huge fan of data viz. I will often tell people that my standard is somebody walking in the hallway and like glancing in the window should understand your data just through like glancing as they walk by. They should see what's happening.
Yeah. See that pie
Please
chart.
don't do a pie chart. Come on.
3D pie chart.
You're a heretic.
3D pie chart, even better.
Dear Lord. But like, if we're doing it really well, it should be obvious what's happening in there. And I think a good poster will have some of those same principles.
Wall of words seems like a good NLP algorithm or band name.
Like bag of words, or wall of words,
words.
Well, some of the NLP algorithms are fantastic. It's like squishy animal or
Yes.
Dracula, this sort of thing. It has definitely applications to what people are going to talk about. Like, get your ideas out there very quickly, and not obfuscate it in any sort of way.
Well, and some of the things are really great presentation principles, right? Like, don't describe like the effects of XYZ. Tell you what the effect was.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If any of you took like a journalism class in high school, like use good principles of journalism. You need to tell me what the article means in the first half a dozen words. And then the first paragraph needs to contain most of what you need to know. And then if you're really interested, there's more stuff. But there's sort of this like hierarchy of information, and most people only need the first one or two layers, and we should get better about science communication in that way.
It is so much easier on the presenter as well to just make a simple PowerPoint as opposed to trying to fit everything into this thing.
So from a graphic design standpoint, that's true. I will say that from an actual, like, in your day job standpoint, that's 100% not true. Because it is so much easier to have the 130 slide deck than to be like, here are the 4 things that matter. Right? Coming to the 4th, it's that Mark Twain thing about, I'm sorry I wrote such a long letter, I would have written a shorter one, but I didn't have enough time.
More time.
It's 100% true. How many people have like tried to take a 200 slide deck and then be like, and then have like a really mean boss like me who says, all right, well, you get 3 slides, and they'll be like, can I use 3-point font? I'm like, no.
I think that's one of the things we struggle with.
You can't write in poppy seeds.
We feel the need to show our work.
So I often say it takes me about a year to deprogram a graduate student, right? Because they really feel like, and Laura's over there like, yes, that's true. They really feel like they have to completely show their work. And particularly if there are some clients for whom that's absolutely true. However, there are methods you can use to show your work without bludgeoning people. So for example, in some of my universes, there have been times when I've got good discipline about this and times when I don't. But it's like, oh, okay, here are the 10 things that you really need to know. And there is a hyperlink on each one that'll take you to the right 3 or 4 pages, and then you can pop right back, and you can do all of your navigating off of one page. And if you're one of those people who is high in trust, or you've built a really solid relationship and they don't question you anymore, then it'd be like, I have a 2-slide presentation. I got one that's got like all the headline. I've got one that kind of sets the stage and reminds you why we're here and whatever else. And then I've got one that's got all of my findings in like one line, no wrapping around, and then it's just hyperlinks back to the backup. And you might still have 130 pages, but you have them in navigable chunks.
If you want to read more.
If you want to, wherever you want to go, curious executive, like, I got you. You're not going to trip me up. But I'm also not going to make you do, like, 73 slides that are virtually identical and try and, like, okay, how is this one different from the one 4 slides ago? You go back and you find this. You spend half of your meeting trying to find the slide you're looking for. And it's like, no, go up. No, I think it was back there. And it's like, what a waste of time.
Absolutely. Alexis, you have been amazing.
I'm going to spend a lot of time with you. Good for my ego.
I'd love to. I've got one announcement to make before we wrap this thing up for the folks online. Scott and I are taking a much-needed week off of the podcast. So for the common listeners in the room, we're going to take a break for a week and then we're going to come back. But
Get a week off.
But thank you so much for joining us today. Before I give you the final word, Scott, any final thoughts for Alexis?
Cole always throws me this sort of question. I never know what to ask. So,
it's every week, man.
It is every week. Okay, yeah. We'll get some feedback. Like, rate your experience from 1 to excellent.
Which experience? With you guys?
Yes.
I'd give you like a solid 9.5.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
We will take it.
All right.
I was expecting like a 6.
You're well organized.
When you start 20 minutes before people show up into the room, you're like, why are they recording already? It's usually not a good experience.
Overachieving. I like that.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely
just wonderful.
Absolutely.
It was a delight. I know we planned this months and months ago, and I've been a little bit jealous watching everybody else get to spend time with you, so it's fun to finally do it.
You were an early adopter. We're very appreciative of that. Thank you so much, Alexis. And you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, with Alexis Fink. Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
As always, all opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott.